Good afternoon on this beautiful Sunday. This week, as we head into the Thanksgiving season, I wanted to take an opportunity to talk to you about my favorite holiday, Thanksgiving. Now, for me, any holiday that focuses on eating delicious food and spending time with family is my vision of paradise. But more importantly, probably as a humanist at least, this is the holiday that really helps us focus on giving thanks and on gratitude. And that's something that I think we could always use a reminder of. So for me, Thanksgiving isn't something that has to be just once a year. And I'll tell you that personally, I actually cook Thanksgiving about 3 times a year because I think it's that good. But in terms of the actual Thanksgiving, the giving of thanks, that could be a daily practice for us. And there's research that shows that it's beneficial both individually and also when we share it to our greater community. And I know for my family, it's something that we try and practice every day. So when we sit down for dinner, we talk about what we were grateful for in the day. We say our thanks to each other if it's something that relates to the other person. So going into this holiday season, let's reflect on how to give thanks daily. What are the benefits of giving thanks? And then how gratitude and the practice of giving thanks can make us better humans. So what I want to talk to you about is 4 specific topics: happiness, perspective, gratitude, and then giving thanks. And they're all slightly different, but all related. So when it comes to happiness, right? Happiness is something that oftentimes we focus on as an external thing. Something else makes us happy. But there's a lot of great research that shows happiness is more of an internal thing. And that there's part of our psychological immune system that returns us to a base state of happiness if we don't work to change that base state. And that changing your mind, how you think about things, is actually the key to being happy in whatever situation you're in. There are people that suffer extraordinary deprivation, yet are still happy. I've seen it in places like Afghanistan. And there are people that have everything a human could ever want and are miserable. And so it's not the external things that will get us to focus on happiness correctly. It's the internal practice. So Dan Gilbert's a writer who writes and a researcher who writes about synthetic happiness. The happiness itself is a practice. It's something that you have to focus on generating with your unique situation. And so one of those ways that we can generate that happiness is gratitude, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But with all the ups and downs that we have, the differences that we see between us and others, between our own circumstances, allows us to have a perspective. And that perspective is another one of those things that can inform our happiness. And I would argue, going to perspective now, that it really sets our happiness baseline. If we've never been exposed to suffering, that anytime a small bad thing happens to us, it seems catastrophic when oftentimes it's really inconsequential. And if we take the time to listen and focus on what others are going through, we can learn perspective from them. And one of the ways to do that is to talk about what we're grateful for, right? So we talk about, hey, we're grateful and for simple things, right? That we have a house, which to most of us probably watching this on a computer or online seems like something assumed, but it shouldn't be. But otherwise, if we can't learn from others, and if we can't look at the differences that exist in the world and what we should be grateful for, the only way to really gain perspective is through ourselves. And oftentimes that's through doing new things and uncomfortable things, because comfort precludes growth. You can only grow when you're uncomfortable. And so giving or saying what we're grateful for might seem a little bit awkward, or going to say thank you to someone for something that they did, even if it were something simple, can be that uncomfortable thing that helps us to grow, that gives us perspective, that helps us to refocus our mindset and our perspective on what we do have as opposed to what we don't. Now, moving on to gratitude, right? Being grateful on a regular basis is something that helps to cause people to focus on the positive aspects of their life. This is really important because the human brain is wired to look at the negatives. There's this thing called negativity bias, and that's our desire, the brain's desire to focus on negative information. Now, from the psychological perspective and the evolutionary perspective, that makes sense. It's important for us to detect threats and detect the things that are negative so that we notice them and we can steer clear of them. But in the modern world where the threats are very, very few and far between, it's something that starts to overwhelm our brain with little tiny things that are negative. And again, if we don't have the perspective of ever being in a position of suffering, it's difficult for us to separate ourselves from the little negative things that happen to the overwhelming good that we're constantly in. And so that practice of gratitude, which, as I'd mentioned, is something that we just talk about every day at the dinner table to say, hey, today I'm grateful for one or two things. An example, yesterday, I was grateful for the time I spent with my son raking leaves in the yard. It was a great time. And it was something simple. It was a little bit of work outside, and it was a nice day. You know, as a 6-year-old, he's talking about all kinds of interesting things, or at least things that are interesting to him, and sharing his perspective with me. And for me, when you talk about what you're grateful for, especially at the end of the day, it's like you're reliving the moment. It's like an immersive 3D experience where you really consider what it was like to live in that moment. The light going through the trees, the smell of the fall air, the hilarious conversation of a 6-year-old boy. And when you say what you're grateful for and you focus on those moments in time, it helps to really encode them in your memory in ways that I think help you to focus on how good things can be when we focus on what is already available to us. Now, gratitude is internally focused, right? It's us focusing on what we have, what we're grateful for. But giving thanks is really an externally focused activity. Now, it starts with us, it starts with our gratitude, and then we give that outward. Now, I think in today's society, giving thanks is almost perceived as a superficial nicety or even as a weakness. But there's some great research, and I'll send some links out with this video. There's a Psychology Today article that talks about thanking others is actually good for you, but it's also good through a Harvard Business Review research article in terms of your community, whether that's at work. Obviously, Harvard Business Review is focused on the workplace environment, but it makes others happier. It creates a virtuous circle where others will then thank you. It encourages everyone toward teamwork because there's recognition for the shared aspect of the work, the project, whether it's at home or elsewhere. And an example for me is I got thanked the other day publicly at work, right? Someone just mentioned how the way that I framed something helped them to articulate it better to an audience that they were going to talk to. And it was something where that person knew what I did and I knew what I did, and both of us knew that it was good work. But to be thanked for it publicly is a step beyond. It seems as though you're giving something of yourself to promote someone ahead of you, right? Or to advance someone. But I've found, and these articles reinforce this, that people who thank others publicly are seen more as leaders, right? They're seen as those who work well with a team. And those are aspects that I think people aspire to and that they admire and that they want as part of their team or their organization. And so the giving thanks, right? This is the final step of going through this whole thought process between happiness, perspective, and then to gratitude and give the thanks. This is an activity that we can do on a daily basis that helps to make our lives better individually and then expands it just from ourselves to our community. And the more we do this, the more we practice this, the more we enshrine this into our daily routine, into our culture, the more virtuous of a cycle we can create. And so your call to action for this Thanksgiving and this holiday season is spend some time reflecting on what you're grateful for first. Think about what's happened to you this year that you're grateful for. Who is it then, moving your gratitude forward, that you can go give thanks to? Don't just be grateful. That's great. That's great for you, but also give thanks, right? And the holiday season tends to be focused just on food and presents and the festivities, which are fun, but go out and give sincere thanks. Because I would argue that food and presents are less of a gift than sincere thanks. Thank your parents for what they've done for you growing up, even if it was a tough time. Thank your kids for what they do for you, even if they're tough to deal with. Thank your coworkers. Go thank your 9th grade teacher, right? The people who really contributed to who you are today. So for me, this year, I want to thank my work mentors, who earlier last year kind of helped me make a career decision that I think was the right one, that helped me keep my focus on my family as opposed to pursuing something that probably wasn't a good fit for me. And then I want to thank my wife for being amazing and continuing to try and do good despite things not always working out. That to me is one form of real courage. So go and tell people this Thanksgiving and throughout the holiday season, thank you for what they contributed to your life. And finally, thank you for being here, for taking the time to invest in yourself, in your community, and in humanity. I hope to see you all next time. So thanks, and go out and give your thanks to others.